All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving our praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the artists of great millstone, who are learned his truth from, and I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. And today is Monday, September 8th, 2025, Missile Monday, and I have this article from RealClearDefense.com, and it says Golden Dome and getting our sword to shield ratio right. So I'm just going to read this article, bring out a few scriptures. Lord willing, this lesson is edifying and straight to the point. And I may not, read this whole thing, but, just reading some of it just to get a summary of what's going on. And it says, mention the Golden Dome within the Washington Beltway, and you'll immediately get dragged into a debate about whether space-based missile defenses can be cost effective. The question is, compared to what? Currently, U.S. and allied strategic defense depends primarily on threatening massive nuclear missile retaliation against major acts of aggression. This raises a fundamental question. Does it make more sense to spend more on the Golden Dome or buying ever more defensive nuclear intercontinental ballistic missiles like the Sentinel? The Trump administration's Golden Dome initiative seems to set forth an impossible goal: defend the U.S. from all air and missile attacks. And that's clearly not going to happen, because it clearly says in the scriptures, prophecy clearly states that America, aka Babylon the Great, is going to be destroyed by fire, so they can sit here and try to come up with all of these different missile defense systems all that they want, but it's not going to work. It's all going to fail. Continuing on, it says America has depended on its friendly neighbors in oceanfront location to do there for centuries. But drone, missile, and space technologies close the distance. The United States cannot afford to ignore the threat. So the question becomes how to build a Golden Dome it can afford. Says there are many choices, most of which proved themselves in the Middle East and Ukraine. Land-based defenses like Patriot and Terminal High Altitude Air Defenses, THAAD, are effective against cruise and ballistic missiles, but only only cover a couple hundred miles. Fighters can intercept missiles across larger regions, or ship. I'm a little, I'm tired. So Salakia says in ship or ground-based ballistic missile defenses like the SM-3 interceptor can take out small ballistic missile salvos at 1,000-mile plus ranges. It says, but none of these systems provides both continental reach and high capacity. To achieve this requires space-based interceptors. Their development and their deployment, though, won't be cheap. And of course, man, it's not going to be cheap. And this is what these different nations are doing. They're exhausting their resources into their military. Hence the term, guns and butter, which, Lord willing, I'm going to do a video on that. I have a little information on it, that I want to bring out, but that's pretty much what is taking place. America is spending its money on its military instead of, helping out its citizens, because again, we're in a time of war. So obviously that's where most of the money is going to go toward building up the military, and its defense systems. So I'm just going to read a little bit more. Then, I'll leave this article in the description for those that want to check it out. It says, currently, the Pentagon is spending hundreds of billions of dollars to modernize our land-based intercontinental ballistic missile force with the Sentinel system. This program is in trouble. In its 15th year, the program is now 81% over budget, and its estimated first test flight has recently slipped by 5 years. If we look at not just the Sentinel program, but the bomber and ballistic missile submarine programs, along with required command, control, communications, and intelligence systems, the Congressional Budget Office estimates that over the next decade, America will spend nearly $1 trillion. If we factor in the fully burdened life cycle costs, which includes not just their development, construction, and maintenance, but related manning costs, the number goes up further. Says factoring in these expenses will make it, factoring in these expenses will make it more sense to buy less nuclear offices and more space-based missile defenses to reduce the probability of a first nuclear strikes. And it says maybe, so it's not a maybe, now if they do, or if they are able to do that, they'll have their little space missile defense. But either way it goes, like I said, man, it's going to fail, because nothing is going to stop these missiles from hitting their targets, man. Nothing. It's nothing that Esau can do to stop prophecy from taking place, and I'm not going to make this one, long. It's going to hit the main points, and that'll be it for this one. So I'm going to hit the book of Joel chapter 3 and verse 9. And it says, proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords, and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. And this is indeed what all of these different nations are doing. They're exhausting their resources into building up their military, getting them more weapons, or if it's not, building their military up, their arsenal, their nuclear arsenal, because this is what these different nations are doing. They know what time they're in. We're clearly in a time of war. We're clearly in a time of war, and this is what the majority of the money is going to go towards, man. Fueling this coming Third World War, which again, it says within the next decade, but America doesn't have another decade, man. This place is on borrowed time, because, next year will mark 250 years, from 1776 to 2026 will mark 250 years that America has been in power, but this place is going to go out, man. It's going to be destroyed, so there's no saving this place, man, So real quick, I'm going to get the book of Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 5, and it says, for every battle of the warrior is with confused noise and garments rolled in blood, but this shall be with burning and fuel of fire. And right, man, this is going to be a traditional war, like ancient warfare was fought, hand-to-hand combat, men on one side of the battlefield, up against, men on the other side of the battlefield, charging each other in the center, guerrilla warfare, men having, swords, spears, shields, bucklers, bow and arrows, things of that sort, going up against each other, that confused noise, hearing, swords hit shields, you know, men letting out that battle cry, men dying on the battlefield, It says that this shall be with burning and fuel of fire, and what could possibly bring about, you know, that burning, that fuel of fire. I'm going to get that in Isaiah chapter 54 and verse 16. And it says, Behold, I have created the smith that bloweth the coals and the fire, and that bringeth forth an instrument for his work, and I have created the waster to destroy. This is what's going to bring about that burning and fuel of fire, the nuclear missiles, because this is that instrument for his work, that waster to destroy, the nuclear missiles themselves, man, in particular the warheads, because that's the part of the missile that does the damage, but this is what these modern day smiths are doing, because what does a blacksmith do? They create weapons of war. And these modern day scientists and physicists are behind creating these weapons of war, and not just any weapons of mass destruction, because the nuclear missiles that are on the earth today have the capability of literally destroying the planet Earth, But again, as I always reference, as it says in the scriptures, the earth abideth forever. The planet Earth won't be destroyed, but America will be completely destroyed, So I'm going to come back to the book of Joel. I'm going to get chapter 2. We'll start at verse 1. And it says, Blow ye the trumpet in Zion, and sound an alarm in my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord cometh, for it is nigh at hand. And right, man, the day of the Lord, a.k.a. World War III, or really World War III, a.k.a. the day of the Lord, because that's what's coming, This is not going to be good, because this is what it entails. Verse 2 says, A day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and of thick darkness, as the morning spread upon the mountains, a great people and a strong. There hath not been ever the like, neither shall there be neither shall there be any more after it, even to the years of many generations. So right, all of these nukes that are being created and that are on the earth today, they're going to be used. None of them are going to be spared, because once they get launched, there's not, they're going to serve their purpose to destroy and help replenish and cleanse the earth. That's the only purpose for these missiles. There's not going to be any use for them after this Third World War takes place. In verse 3, a fire devoureth before them, and behind them a flame burneth, right? And when it says a fire, devoureth before them, these missiles or the warheads are going to be on fire, because they're going to be traveling so fast. Here's the reason why they just look like a straight bright light, because they're going to be traveling at Mach speeds, so they're going to be on fire. So that's that fire that devoureth before them. And the flame that burneth behind them is that rocket propulsion system guiding the missiles to their targets, It says the land is as the Garden of Eden before them, and behind them a desolate wilderness. And right, you still have parts of the U.S. where the landscape is beautiful, and again, as I used in the last example, just the state of Michigan alone, different parts of Michigan, the landscape is beautiful. You wouldn't even think that you were hell in America or in the state of Michigan, but it's beautiful, but as it stands, just like it says, behind them a desolate wilderness. Once these missiles get launched, man, this place is going to be desolate, it's going to be laid waste. Once that fire dies down, and this place goes, when it goes out, this is going to be a desert, And it says, and nothing shall escape them, and nothing is going to escape these missiles, man, save the elect. The elect are going to be able to escape, by way of the chariots, excuse me, Slakia. But those that weren't written in the book of life, those that weren't predestined from the beginning to receive salvation, aren't going to make it, So nothing is going to be able to escape these nukes, man. Nothing. Verse 4, the appearance of them is as the appearance of horses, and as horsemen, so shall they run. Like the noise of chariots on the tops of mountains shall they leap, like the noise of a flame of fire that devoureth the stubble, as a strong people set in battle array. And right, man, you're going to hear them. They're going to make a noise because, again, you're going to hear these missiles being launched. You're going to hear that rocket propulsion system, guiding these missiles, man. So it's going to make a great noise because there's going to be thousands upon thousands of them, headed toward Babylon, In verse 6, it says, before their faces the people shall be much pained, and all faces shall gather blackness. People are going to see their death coming, and they're not going to know what to do besides just sit and wait for it, It says, they shall run like mighty men, they shall climb the wall like men of war, and shall march every one on his ways, and they shall not break their ranks. Right, man, these missiles are going to have a particular rank. They're not going to break their rank. One missile isn't going to, speed past another one. Whatever particular order they're launched in, they're going to, follow that order, Verse 8, it says, neither shall one thrust another, and shall not, it's like they shall walk every one in his path, and when they fall upon the sword, they shall not be wounded. And right, man, one missile isn't going to, bump into another one. It's going to detonate in midair, or, these different defense systems, aren't going to be able to intercept these missiles either. Just like it says, when they fall upon the sword, they should not be wounded, meaning nothing is going to stop them. Nothing. And that word sword in this verse, let's get it. The word sword, which shlach, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, or shlach. But what does it say? Missile. So, once these missiles get launched, man, nothing is going to stop them. Even these defense systems aren't going to be able to stop them, man. They're not going to break their ranks, as it says, So they're going to fly from one end of the earth and land in the other, So I'm going to end it with this. Again, didn't want to make it too long, because I could always reference, Revelation 9, in verse 15, because again, there is an appointed time when this destruction is going to take place, But I'm going to end it with Isaiah chapter 13 and verse 4. And it says, the noise of a multitude in the mountains, like as of a great people, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts mustereth the hosts of the battle. They come from a far country, from the end of heaven, even the Lord and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land. And right, man, just like I said in Joel, it's going to make a great noise, man. You're going to hear these missiles coming, And just like I said, they're going to come from one end of the earth to the other, meaning, just as an example, missiles are going to be launched from Russia, and they're going to land in America, Because as we know, pursuant to Genesis 27 and verse 40, Esau, Edom's blessing with the sword. But as it stands, these are really the Lord's weapons, The Lord gave Esau, Edom the knowledge to bring forth these weapons, but ultimately these are the Lord's weapons, the weapons of his righteous anger, which he's going to use to take Esau down, And it says to destroy the whole land. So America is going to be destroyed. So they can sit here and try to build this golden dome, put defense systems in space, or whatever. Prophecy is not going to fail. America is going to be destroyed. Regardless if you people want to hear it or not, this place is going to go out by way of fire. So Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from, and I like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. Till next time I say, Shalom.